I had been Priscilla's pastor for 4 or 5 years when she began exploring with me her sense that God might be calling her from her job at the Medical College of Wisconsin into the ordained ministry. Excuse me. We had many conversations during which she explored that sense of call from many different angles. I have a tickle in my throat this morning. I apologize. Then when she finally reached the decision to go to seminary, she invited me to journey with her to 2 seminaries that she was considering. It was an exciting time and a real blessing to be with her on this journey. But something truly unexpected happened at the 2nd seminary we visited. During our interview, the dean of admissions kept talking about this minority program or that minority program. It seemed to me like every other sentence was about something special that the seminary had done or was committed to doing for minority students. Now, I suppose that wasn't too surprising since Priscilla happened to be African American, and the dean was trying to recruit her or perhaps to make her feel welcome. But there was something about the tone of her voice or the consistent use of the term minority that seemed really offensive to me. Priscilla showed no apparent reaction. On our way back to Wisconsin, as we were evaluating the visits, the dean's comments kept eating at me until I finally decided to take a risk and say something. It was a risk because never once in all of the conversations that Priscilla and I have had we ever talked about race or anything even remotely related to the fact that she was black. Finally, I said, I don't know if it bothered you or not, but I just have to say that if that woman made one more mention of minority, I thought I was going to jump out of my seat and strangle her. Now, that was a pretty strong statement for me, because basically I'm a nonviolent person. Well, let me tell you, it was as if my words gave her permission to open a part of herself to me that she had kept carefully guarded. She began to talk about how offensive such comments were. She talked about how it felt to always be labeled because of the color of her skin. She talked about what it was like to grow up black in Kentucky and how the racism she experienced when she moved to Wisconsin was more subtle, but just as real. Mile after mile, she poured out her heart, sharing her pain and all that she had experienced. It was indeed the most sacred of conversations, for she finally trusted me with the whole of who she was, holding nothing back. I cherish that memory and the real friendship that grew from it during her journey to seminary and then ordination, and finally her first call as the pastor of a congregation where she was one of 3 people of color in the entire town where the church was located. A bold move for her and for that congregation. Sacred conversations. Conversations that hold the possibility of change, transformation, healing, and growth. Sacred conversations. A little more than a month ago, United Church of Christ General Minister and President Reverend John Thomas and the Collegium of Officers issued a call for the congregations of the UCC to begin the process of engaging in a sacred conversation about race. A pastoral letter from Reverend Thomas and the Collegium of Ministers, which looks like this, is on the back table and out in the hall. And it begins with these words. Beloved sisters and brothers, on May 18th in United Church of Christ pulpits across the nation, pastors will be preaching on race in the hope of inaugurating a sacred conversation in the coming months that is urgently needed in our churches, in our homes and workplaces, and in the halls of power. Racism remains a wound at the heart of our nation, a wound that cannot be wished away or treated carelessly. In this sacred conversation, we seek to engage one another in deep and sustained dialogue that may be uncomfortable at times, but is absolutely necessary if our nation is to find genuine healing of its past and present sins. Not only the health of our nation is at stake, but also truth-telling and racial reconciliation are crucial to our own spiritual, physical, and emotional wholeness. Over the past month, as I thought about all of this, I began thinking of the many sacred conversations around race that I have had with courageous people who have dared to trust me to listen and learn from their stories, even as they dared to open themselves to learn from me and my story. I thought of George and Nancy, the Puerto Rican couple who came to see me shortly after moving to Milwaukee. In Puerto Rico, they had been members of the Disciples of Christ congregation, and at the time I was serving one of two Disciples congregations in the whole Milwaukee area. They wanted to become part of our congregation, but first, they wanted to find out if they and their children would be welcome in our predominantly Anglo congregation. It saddened my heart that they had to even ask, but I understood why they did. They did come, and the congregation did welcome them, and I had many, many conversations during which they shared with me their story, their struggles, their hopes, and their dreams. Because of their honesty and their deep faith, I grew, and so did the congregation. But they grew as well. They grew as they came to understand our struggles, to rid ourselves of the often unconscious racist attitudes that seem to seep into our very being just because we live in a society that tries to divide us because of the color of our skin, the country of our birth, or the accent of our words. They grew as they came to understand why our congregation extended welcome to those who happened to be gay or lesbian. They grew, and we grew, in sacred conversations. Conversations that held the possibility of change, transformation, healing, and growth.